And we're live. Today I got Aaron Vallejo on today. He was part of our Healthcare Advocate Summit. He was on site providing translation services and interpreting services for anybody that needed it. Today's been about technology and technology solutions for the advocate. I want to bring Aaron on to talk about some of the technology, some of the things he does, because there's always a human element to getting patients on product and therapy, and there's always a person in the loop. Even though we have advanced technologies and automations, we always need a person in the loop, and we can't forget about our patients who maybe have a limited English proficiency. So Aaron, why don't you tell me a little bit about your company and what you do for advocates and patients?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present here and to talk. So in-house interpreting is a white glove healthcare language service provider. So we take a creative approach to providing language access. Before providing any services, we take a deep dive to understand our clients' therapeutic areas, their disease states, and any workflow processes. We use this to then train our interpreters to become an extension of our client's team or your team, and provide continuity of care for their patients. We pride ourselves on reducing disparities in the quality of care to improve treatment adherence by providing a tailored interpretation, which at the end of the day, it allows us to detect confusion that could lead to barriers of care. With this technology solution presentation, we provide the solution of documentation or document translation and remote interpretation for over the phone and video remote interpreting. We provide services through a website portal, a mobile app, or a dial-in, as well as integrations with WebEx, Zoom, and an open API, which can allow for further integrations in the future.
That's cool. Thank you, Aaron, for explaining that. Yeah, I think we often forget sometimes, most of the people that I know that speak another language do speak English fairly well, but I know there's a lot of older population or their parents, and there's plenty of population that do have limited English. And so we're talking about access programs, we're talking about copay assistance, we're talking about programs that people need to get their therapy and the drugs and the access they need. And language can be a huge barrier. So can you tell me, in a hospital system or in a technology solution, what are the importance of having a qualified interpreter there available to help those patients that really need that language translation and interpretation?
Yeah, Matt, I think you hit it on the head right at the beginning there. You said a lot of people do speak English at a very proficient level. You would assume that it's a very proficient level because you're having a conversation with that individual. What I've noticed as far as in the hospital setting, it's a scary area for a lot of patients because the healthcare system is different. Western medicine is different, right? Or it could be a cultural barrier. And so while they are proficient in everyday conversations that they would have at work with friends, when it comes to something as sensitive as their treatment, there's a lot of information that is unknown. It's not the same as in their home country, and so it's confusion. And even if they are able to have a conversation, there may be terms or concepts they just don't understand. So if you think of an interpreter as someone that just repeats a message into another language, then I guess it would just depend on how well that person can repeat the message. But an interpreter is actually something a bit more. An interpreter is transferring a message meaning for meaning. It's the voice, they become the voice of the speaker. So if I'm the interpreter, I take on your persona. I am you. I am the doctor, and I'm speaking as if I am the doctor. What this allows is for more of a conversation between doctor and patient, or front-end service provider and the patient. So it comes off as a conversation and not so much as a reporting of he said this, they said that. It's more all-inclusive. Also, a trained interpreter is able to read facial cues, right? Responses and looking for confusion. This is the biggest key, and one of the biggest benefits of having an interpreter is that they're able to assist an individual that doesn't speak the language to understand there may be some possible confusion, right? And so this allows for us to avoid confusion by clarifying. A trained interpreter also is looking for the cultural aspect of a patient as well as the culture of the provider. That piece often goes unseen, not knowing what advanced directives are, right? Or not knowing why consent is needed for a surgery on my toe. Does that mean that I'm going to be, is this something that's going to potentially be life-threatening, right? Where that to us is an everyday consent for surgery. That's just what you do. For somebody who's not familiar with that, it may seem like this provider is not very confident with the service they're providing. And so understanding those cultural barriers, understanding the systemic barriers is what an interpreter is actually providing. So a qualified interpreter is not somebody that's repeating a message, but they're really helping to have that patient understand the message. So, and even to that extent, not all interpreters are the same. An interpreter can be a jack of all trades, but a master of none. If you are in a field so specialized in medicine, such as with foundations or with trying to get somebody access to medication, and the conversations are so detailed, unless you're really fully integrated into that process, even though your intentions are good to interpret a message accurately, an interpreter doesn't know what they don't know, right? So
Yeah.
having specialized interpreters helps to get the message accurately across.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I agree. I mean, if I go to the doctor and I talk to a healthcare a physician or a nurse, and they'd be speaking in my same language, and I don't understand it, right? Because even the whole medical insurance, all that is almost like a different language. And I understand that somebody with a different culture background might not understand those terms in the context they're given. So with COVID and all the things that have been happening, and language is so much, you're talking about body cues and looking for understanding, and that the patient is understanding the doctor and the doctors understanding the patient. Tell us about what has changed with telehealth and technology during COVID, and how does that all play in part into what you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're playing catch up just like everyone else. In fact, in 2019, before the pandemic was what it is now, on-site interpreting was the preference. It was predominantly on-site. It's a better service, and you can think of it as a better service as well. If I, the interpreter, am there in person, I can detect facial cues much better. I can allow for a better flow of conversation. I can clarify better. I can see everyone in the room. There's no technology aspect that I have to worry about if the Wi-Fi is a good connection, right? So, and the patient feels that humanistic touch of somebody's there with them that speaks my language. And so it's always been something that on-site has been pushed. But during the pandemic, even med students weren't allowed to go in the rooms, because if you weren't necessary for the treatment at that time, we're not going to expose individuals that don't need to be exposed. And where interpreters could be utilized as a remote, they didn't allow, for the most part across the country, interpreters to interpret on site. And so then we came to this this need for telehealth. And before the pandemic, our company was set up and is set up as was primarily a remote service. Right. We do provide on-site, but we were coming from the other angle of there's a remote aspect to this. But before the pandemic, we saw projections of telehealth really kind of hitting the hospital and clinical setting in about 2025. That's what we were projecting, and we were ramping up for 2025. When the pandemic hit, everyone needed to go telehealth. They were even having services provided of interpretation through systems that weren't even really HIPAA compliant or protecting patient information. They were using Zoom that at that point wasn't a secure platform. And that was just because we needed to get information across to patients, but we needed to also protect the spread of the pandemic. And so with all of this change, there was this telehealth came to the forefront, and medical interpreting was kind of a second thought, right? We needed to get the system up, get providers connected with patients, and then, oh my goodness, what do we do for interpreting, right? And so it's been kind of patching holes, trying to get conversations across. And so the world of telehealth with medical interpreting is in its infancy. And so what we try to do is try to bridge that gap to allow for the conversations to be equal, from English patients to limited English proficient patients, or LEP patients, which they're commonly known as.
No, I think you're right. I think telemedicine is here to stay at some level. It does have its benefits, and you're saying that you also kind of complement that telemedicine with tele interpreting services. So I've always heard of like interpreting services where you call somebody and there's a three-way phone call or something like that. you do video now, is what you're saying? Is that what your company was set up to do even before the pandemic? And is that primary now because of the other cues? I mean, I know people are reluctant to get on video and we're always on Zoom calls and stuff, but when it comes to medicine
Mhm.
and understanding your doctor, it seems very the way to go. I mean, there's no other way.
Absolutely. At the beginning, I kind of mentioned that we do provide over the phone and video interpreting, which is a remote service. It depends on what type of call you're making. Are you calling a patient at home for medication to get more information about a prior authorization form, or is it more they're on site with a doctor and there's a need for everyone's in the room? We need a video interpreter, which is the best service in that point because I can see the patient, I can see their facial expressions, and I can do a better job. It really just depends on what type of call it is, and yes, we do provide over the phone and video, as well as integrate into technology platforms.
Okay, I think you made a good point that I was trying to make is a lot of us think about video interpreting for strictly medicine, but the administrative burden and things like that, we talked about applications and copay assistance and stuff like that. You could need you could be an office worker and need some sort of translation interpreting services. And I keep getting those words mixed up. I know you specifically know the very particular details between what translation is and what interpreting is. And when I think about it, I get it right. But the interpreting services that you need at all levels of healthcare to make sure that that patient gets the most optimum care they could get, that's important to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of listening to the technology platforms from the last couple of days, often medical interpreters are kind of an afterthought, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to offer compliance, and so that's why interpretation is provided. But there are so many theoretical fires to put out that helping patients get on treatment is our primary goal. But when providing technology solutions to expedite processes like a prior authorization form, copay assistance, or benefits investigation, the goal is to make it easier and more efficient for the end user. I apologize, my toddler just walked in. One place that is difficult to optimize the technology is the human aspect, right, of the patient interaction, like we kind of touched on, to send content in their language, to schedule a call to help answer questions that are required for prior authorization forms or benefit investigation. So I guess I would encourage the technology solutions, such as those that we've heard over the past couple of days, along with the organizations and facilities that are listening to this presentation, to kind of reflect on their current solutions. They may have, there may be a place for LEP patients to ask themselves or to ask, is our current solution meeting the needs of our telehealth and technology-driven world? Matt, I think you're muted.
Thank you. I believe you did a video for us about LEP patients and some of the stats and statistics. I mean, the United States is a melting pot of all types of cultures and languages, and we know people come here for medical procedures and stuff like that. So we've got to think about it in two parts. There's probably a decent amount of population LEP patients that may fall into indigent or at those meet those requirements for special programs that exist, and there's plenty of population that meet that requirements. Just speaking to those that might need help interpreting. What else do I have here? I had a couple questions for you. Hold on one second. Aaron, is there anything in particular you want to touch on that I haven't asked you already? I forget how long we scheduled this Zoom call for.
We scheduled it for 3 hours. We have plenty of time to talk, Matt. I would just like to just kind of reiterate that with the solutions that we have currently in our hospital systems, in your organizations for those that are listening, is there a way that we can improve to get better? At the end of the day, we're all trying to give our patients the best service. And so to speak to your language service providers, that you may have a department that is tasked with medical interpreting, translation. Reach out to them. Find out if there's a technology solution already implemented, or if there's a way for you to implement that to make your service to your patients that much more effective.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you to In-House Interpreting for providing translation and interpreting services for the Healthcare Advocate Summit. If anybody needs any interpreting services, we'll send them your way. And thank you for taking time today to explain to us a little bit about not only what your company does, but patients that need this type of service. It is available, and they should be asking their provider and advocates who need this kind of help with their patients. They should be asking, hey, do we have a interpreting service that we could reach out to?
Absolutely, and I'd be happy to speak to anybody about how they could potentially improve their service. With or without working with us, there are ways that you can improve your service. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you, Aaron.